Welcome to the latest episode of Surgeons' Lives. I'm your host, John Monson. My guest today is Dr. Erin King-Mullins. Erin was born in Florida and has dedicated her life to developing her practice in Atlanta, Georgia. She is quite obviously a force of nature. She did her colorectal training in Georgia and went into fairly standard faculty practice before deciding to branch out onto her own and taking an enormous leap of faith by establishing her own single-handed private practice in Atlanta. Not content with developing her concierge type of private practice, she's also served in multiple leadership positions in numerous societies, including serving on the Executive Council of the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons. This was a very wide-ranging conversation that touched on a whole spectrum of topics, from what Jesus might have said to Dave Chapelle at a dinner party, to the challenges facing an African-American female surgeon in the United States. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and send your comments, please. In the meantime, however, let's go straight over and talk to Dr. Erin Mullins. My name is John Monson, and this is Surgeons' Lives. So, well, listen, if you've seen any of these interviews before, you'll know that we spent a little bit of time talking about, how we got here today, and then a little bit about what I call the stuff that matters, which is, not necessarily the work and the CV and all of those titles, etc., etc.
Yeah.
that matter in life. But why not start us off, as we always do, with a little bit of early life and career. Start with the words I was born in.
Okay. I was born in Orlando, Florida. We'll get back to that later.
Yeah.
Uh, but grew up in Sanford, which is pretty much halfway between Daytona and Orlando there. And there was no aha moment when it came to wanting to do medicine. I just remember people asking me, and I said I wanted to be a doctor. And so really, I think I solidified that decision around the age of 12, which coincided with my older sister's foray into medicine as well. So my sister is the only other physician in the family as of right now. Maybe we'll have more in the future. Um, but she's 11 years older than me. And so I got to actually see that track. And so it just became, hey, clearly I can do it, if she can. And so, um, well, I can't necessarily like say that she was the motivation for me to like go into medicine. She was definitely the example, once that decision was made. Um, and so
Was
went
there
to,
a family business?
no, we're the only ones in medicine in the family. Um, and so it was kind of like, so you go through the standard processes, right? I didn't really deviate, no time off. Went to Xavier University of Louisiana, that's in New Orleans. And part of that was just their track record in they've been number one for probably 20 plus years, actually well over 20 years, because if they were number one when I applied and my 20-year reunion was several years ago, in placing and helping place African Americans into pre-health programs should they decide. And so, like, when you signed up to be a pre-med, like, it was your major going in freshman year. You were writing your first personal statement in like September or October of your freshman, year in college. So it was a whole system. You had weekly meetings, so all the pre-med students would join into this auditorium and discuss things, and they'd help you get you into summer internships and programs. So that's how I kind of bolstered my CV. Went to Emory for med school here in Atlanta, and once I experienced Atlanta, knew that this is where I would settle or hopefully have my career. And doing level one trauma at Grady Memorial Hospital as a med student and all the glitz and glare and gore. Thought
Yeah.
I was going to be a trauma surgeon. Um, and my then mentors, Dr. Dave Feliciano and Grace Rosicki, who were, hallmarks within the trauma space, recommended I actually go back home to Orlando because there's a level one trauma center there, Orlando Health. So they, said, hey, make sure you apply there. So ended up going back home about 6 months in, decided trauma was not for me and thought I was going to do general surgery. And then I got to experience several rotations in colorectal surgery, lots of strong mentors within that space. And so decided to pursue colorectal surgery, did that fellowship here in Atlanta within the North Side system and stayed on afterwards. And so here I am.
What attracted you about Atlanta? I always, one of those fun facts about Atlanta is that it has a skyline that can be used in movies and nobody knows what it is.
Yeah. Yep.
But what attracted you about Atlanta to live in?
It was like the fast pace without the cold weather, me coming from the South and not super fast and not everybody's like stuck on top of each other like New York. That was just way too much for me. So, and also having the seasons, I can't have it too cold for too long. And so I needed to stay in the South, but I needed to be able to travel, which the airport busiest in the world, be able to do things. So Broadway shows come here, great sports teams. You're 2.5 hours from the mountains, the Blue Ridge. So if you want to do a cabin, maybe 3.5 hours from the beach, some nice panhandle beaches from me growing up in Florida. So it really is central to pretty much everything that you want to do.
So just by that description, tells me that you were somebody who had many things that you wanted to do in life. Yeah, first of all, I think as we know each other, I know that that's true. But second, were you always like that? Were you always a go-getter?
I think so in some regards, like kind of cautiously. I'd say within the past few years, I've kind of shed a little bit of the fear. Um, and my husband was actually very instrumental in helping me realize that, and not in a presumptuous way or a boastful way that like, that I am the talent. And I really had to learn that, one of the parts that I didn't get to necessarily in just sharing my story was that, I stayed on with the hospital system where I did fellowship. And then fast forward 7.5 years, having my first child, COVID, lots of the just kind of psychosocial, socioeconomic, just overall social and healthcare changes that happened during that time. I had to realize that no one's going to take care of me like I will. And as much as you want to fuss and fight and prove your worth, if they don't want to recognize that, they're just not. You're not going to necessarily convince someone of that. So by then, I had obviously way more years ahead of me than behind me in practice and needing to grow and raise a family. So I had to step out on faith and start my own practice. So I'm almost 3 years into being a solo private practice colorectal surgeon in Metro Atlanta. But, strangely enough, getting back to what your comments are, I was able to really grow and develop other interests that I have and really establish an identity outside of just being a doctor, just being a surgeon. Obviously now a mom, but an entrepreneur. But my career is not me, it's a part of me. And so now I've been
Yeah.
able to fully engage and develop, those other tracks in life.
So let me just go back to early days, or earlier in your career, and I want to come back to the business about setting up your own business,
Hmm.
obviously, but in your early days, and this is obviously something that I don't understand
Sure.
as an old white guy, but uh, as a woman and as an African American, um, in the United States about to pursue medicine, what percentage of your mental energy um, has to be spent navigating those challenges in addition to the challenges of just going to medical school and being a doctor and doing a residency?
Sure.
That's talk to us a little bit about that.
You know, um, there is a constant need to validate yourself. Um, and you don't really realize it, or you may or may not, just depending on, what your background and experiences are. But while one of the phrases that I've come to love right now is, comparison is the thief of joy. Not everybody has the privilege of being able to fully embrace and utilize that statement or that phrase because you will, especially in medicine, as a minority, as a woman in the United States, and then fast forward into a male predominated specialty and fast forward to like as far as general medicine and then like the subspecialty, the surgery, and then the surgical subspecialty, you don't necessarily get the privilege of just saying comparison is the thief of joy. Um, you have to compare yourselves routinely. It's like indoctrinated in you. Thank God we don't have the pyramid program experience anymore that used to be a part of the surgical specialty, but you were always constantly persistently compared to others because as you rise through the ranks you realize that there are less and less spots for you to advance to. So I mean, even right now, specializing in colorectal, I think there's like a 30% of trainees don't match into colorectal their first time around. And so I think it made me stronger, definitely builds character and resilience. And in now owning my own practice, I can now come as my full self and really deliver care the way I want to across the spectrum of race, socioeconomic status, and gender. Now, I would say probably because I'm a woman, about 80% of my patients, maybe 75, but like roughly 80% of my patients are women. But uh and I did start out with, I guess by nature of the beast, a more African American predominant patient population, but it has drastically, you know, opened up as far as all of the different races and ethnic backgrounds that I treat because, I feel that my great care word has gotten out. And so people are referring their friends, their neighbors, their bosses, so many people, employers in the area realize, hey, some of their employees had great experiences, so go down over here so we can make sure you're well taken care of. And so that's how it happens.
So, one of the ways you dealt with, and this is my word, prejudice, but because it applies to, doesn't necessarily apply to color or gender or whatever, but wherever prejudice is, one of the ways you've addressed dealing with prejudice is, of course, to be the boss and decide to do it yourself. But in 20 years, I'm guessing the ladder to climb to success 20 years ago would have been much more difficult than it is now. I mean, it is a different world, and the societies are different. The political climate, in terms of the medical political climate, is different. What's been your experience in that journey? Is it something that you ignore now and just carry on as an equal partner?
Definitely can't ignore it. Patients will still come in with certain prejudices, and you have to address that. And by addressing it, you don't necessarily have to challenge them directly, but you do have to address it in the way you move and the way you behave because it just is what it is. If you close your eye, I hate when people say, and sorry, I know hate is a strong word, but I hate when people say that they're colorblind. That's just not true. Um, and that also invalidates some of people's experiences and feelings. That's just like saying I don't see gender.
Yeah.
That's not true, you know? So it just is what it is. The first thing you see when you see me before I open my mouth is you see that I'm an African American woman. Like you're not blind. And so we do have to address those prejudices head on, but also understand that I am not going to offer my level of care or my standard of care to that. And that can go either way. That can go to the person who may come in need and they don't really have a lot of financial means, all the way to the person who is so privileged they pay for everything cash and they come in with a what they've dictated that they want and how things should go, and you have to tell them no.
Yeah.
So it works on both sides.
And what about, so that's when it comes to clinical practice. But what about the world of surgery business in terms of, hospitals and societies and various things like that? I mean, the level of my word again, prejudice has
Mhm,
changed a lot in 20 years as well. And your career has basically existed entirely during that time frame of change.
mhm.
Um, do you think there's a long way to go, or much more to be done, or are we at a sweet spot now? What do you think?
Yeah. I think there's a long way to go. I think people are really um, facing the reckoning with which some of, again, the indoctrinated thoughts and beliefs were versus like academic medicine versus private versus community practice. I mean, I would challenge, anyone in academia to rise to my level of efficiency, because, and again, not to seem braggadocious or whatnot, but when you've established a relationship within your community and with the stakeholders, so even though I'm an independent private practice physician, the hospital, definitely sees and values what the contributions are. So if I can get the buy-in from the team without, bribing or doing anything crazy, like I can knock out 13, 14 colonoscopies and still be done by 3 p.m., right? Because people understand that it's not for me, it's for the patient, but there's still other things that need to be done later. But also what I bring to the table a lot in my different leadership roles within not only the American Society of Colorectal Surgeons, Association of Women Surgeons, um, American Board of Surgery, and now president of the Society of Black Colon and Rectal Surgeons. Um, we have to realize that the overwhelming majority of patients are cared for outside of academia.
Yeah.
And while we need research, obviously, to understand, especially when it pertains to, say, colorectal cancer, young, touching younger lives more aggressively, not everybody has access to the quote unquote standard of care. And so we need to make sure that while we are espousing these developments in medicine, we also have to keep in mind the patient, putting them first, and at least provide optimal care because optimal is going to pertain to that patient's situation. So, again, their socioeconomic status. Are they a single parent? Are they the primary breadwinner? How far do they live from the institution? I'm blessed to be in Metro Atlanta, but patients come see me from 3 hours away. And so while radiation therapy may be advocated for a certain stage of cancer, if they literally can't make it, then surgery may need to be the primary treatment. That's optimal in that patient's case. And so you're not doing them a disservice. You're doing them a disservice if you are not willing to offer that because they will not complete treatment. Like they can listen to you all day and say, I understand. Okay, yeah. And when the SHIT literally hits the fan and they literally cannot come, you've now done that patient a disservice
Yeah.
because they're not getting care at all.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons for, just in a very minor issue, it's one of the reasons why I think, for example, short course radiation therapy speaks to that specifically. Who wants to drive 2 hours a day for 5 minutes for 6 weeks, as opposed to let's do it this week, Monday to Friday, and we're done?
Yeah.
I mean, It's not patient centric sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're now 3 years into being the big boss of the Colorectal Wellness Center. Um, Two questions. When did the idea strike you? I mean, you didn't just open the doors. It took a bit of time to do it. And who taught you about business? Um, uh, uh, and that's, I guess, a third bit. How scary was it to say, you're going to bet the farm on this?
Yeah.
Tell me about that journey.
So I'll start with the last question first. It was absolutely terrifying. Um, when you get trained to go through the process, most people, especially these days, are not even, um, they don't see the private practice world during training. So, which is very different than, the earlier days of medicine. You had to find doctors who were in the area to take on the students to train them in the more apprenticeship model. And so, with the academic and hospital systems taking over education, that just is not seen anymore. So it was terrifying to think that you could do that on the own. Um, I started getting inklings, um, maybe a year or so prior to my um actually departing. And that was more so like, hey, yeah, in the future, when my next contract is due to review, let's see what's going on. Let's see what my, goals are, the patient base, and, how well am I doing within the practice? I'd taken on a leadership role within the practice for research for the fellows and all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, it's on the table. We'll see later. But it became an urgent need when the decision was made because unfortunately my compensation was going to be adjusted based upon the 2020 numbers of COVID and my maternity leave. And it just was not sustainable. Like I could, and the funny thing was the physician contract representative told me on the phone that, yeah, COVID was a hard year for a lot of people finding jobs. Even waitresses were having difficulty finding jobs. And not only did I think my eyes and mind just completely turn red at that moment when I like looked at the statement and I politely said, I'm ending this conversation with you now. I was on the phone, but you know, I actually looked at it and I was like, I actually probably at some of the high-end restaurants would have been making less than a waitress or a bartender based upon the numbers that were presented to me because the numbers were based upon like basically not working in 2020, right? Like elective cases were canceled. I had 3 months of maternity leave and it was completely out of my control and there was no willingness to negotiate. And so I was to some degree forced into a situation that became, again, a blessing. Experienced so many unique opportunities because I've been able to be a person and share my expertise outside of just medicine. And I think that's one of the frustrating things, is because we have so much to offer outside of just day-to-day clinical medicine. The conversations we have with people and patients, even outside of our own specialty, can really do them a lot of good. And you don't even know that's happening unless you're afforded the chance to do so.
Yeah. Can I just pause and ask you? I have to say, my sense is, and my personal experience has been that the relationship between hospital systems, maybe it's just one hospital, maybe it's a big system, and the physicians that they employed has turned very sour in the last 5 years, particularly since COVID. I don't know whether that was the trigger, but it's certainly since COVID. And I see so many surgeons say that it's no longer a comfortable place to be, and I see doctors being fired for little reason, that it doesn't quite fit, and that whole concept of loyalty is gone. It doesn't
Yeah.
count for anything now. Is that something you sensed as well?
I have, and I think it's the lack of autonomy, but it's not even the autonomy when it comes to making clinical decisions, right? Like, yes, you do have RVUs, and so sometimes you feel like someone may be looking over your shoulder in the sense of, why didn't you operate on that person, or why did you operate on that person? But there's no autonomy a lot of times when it comes to staffing, logistics,
Yeah.
the basic entry point to you have no control over the person that answers the phone. And sometimes that person is in a completely remote location
Yeah.
that actually doesn't even know where your office is.
Yeah.
And so if a patient is calling and asking how to get to the office and the person answering the phone doesn't know, like that's their first, but they don't know that, you know, Jared or, whoever, Marie answered the phone. It's Dr. King-Mullins's office.
Yeah.
It's her staff. And so that now gets reported into the Google review online, and now you have to be subject to that. It's just there's lack of autonomy in the overall culture of your practice. And I think that's also, equally as disheartening as to some degree some of the lack of autonomy on clinical, practice.
So there you are. You're like many people. I just spoke to a vascular surgeon recently who was had regular meeting with his faculty leaders who said, we're going to have to cut your salary. Be, not because he wasn't doing any work, but just they decided they were going to cut the rate. And so he said, okay, I'm out of here. 20 years in the job, resigned, gone.
Yep.
So,
And it's frustrating. And sorry to interrupt, but
mm,
the frustrating thing is like, besides that, the downstream revenue that is brought in by the physician, and we're the ones, we're in the middle that get cut. And while business wise, I understand the concept, it doesn't make it less disheartening and less frustrating because I understand obviously they can't go to the environmental services staff or, the chefs in the kitchen and say, hey, I know you made 15 an hour last year, but budget cuts, you can only do 14 a year this year. That would seem cruel and unusual, right? And so it just seems so much easier just to pass that on to the physician, which again, not any better, but it's very disheartening.
yeah. So, for whatever reason, you decided the writing was on the wall for you and you needed to. So, what do you do about that? You put the phone down from your conversation, you say, I can't do this anymore. Now what?
Yeah. So I was fortunate. Yeah, that's the last part of the question I didn't answer. So my husband works in healthcare finance, and so he works with large physician groups and hospital systems and things like that. And so while there were a lot of tools and resources he pointed me in the direction to, I still had to do my additional groundwork and due diligence because what may work for larger multi-specialty groups doesn't necessarily work for surgical subspecialties or very small groups. But at least, the ball was rolling and kind of what the core principles and architecture is needed. And then I did have a couple of physicians in different specialties. They actually left a similar hospital, the same hospital system around the same time, and we all went the independent route. And so we had a lot of brainstorming conversations. And then there's a couple of podcasts that are out there that are definitely dedicated to. There's one that was like, hey, you know, establish your LLC or PC, whatever you're going to do. Two, find a location. You need a tax ID number. You need this. So there are some blueprints that are out there, but I think there's a lot more with social media and all of these types of things. It's just so much more readily available to you now, and I just used all of those as kind of my bridge.
So, as a single-handed somebody about to start a single-handed practice,
Hmm?
without going into or prying into your details, I'm guessing you
Sure.
had to borrow some money to do this.
Mhm.
Where did you find it easy to borrow the money, or did they win a one person single-handed? That's a
Yeah.
bit. yesterday, or did they say, no, yeah, we're up for this?
Sure. So there are some banks that are dedicated to physician practices or healthcare practices. And so I found there's two of those. And then I also applied for the standard like SBA loan. Um, if you, I'll just throw this out there. If you think this is something you might want to do, you definitely want to try to secure the loan maybe before your official W-2 is over, because it just obviously makes it easier when you have some sort of stream of income and paychecks to kind of demonstrate, but it's not impossible. And again, the banks that are literally dedicated now, the major banks will say, "Oh yeah, we have a physician specialty loan." It's still kind of under the standard, like SBA or Small Business Association program, but there are banks who literally only fund physicians, dentists, veterinarians. And so it's a much more streamlined route. And they also have a lot of additional resources that they have at their fingertips that can help you when it comes to real estate or attorneys, social media marketing, platforms and things like that. So is it, I mean, I guess it's easier than you think it is, put it that way.
Sure. Well, it's
Yeah.
doable.
Yeah.
It's for doable. And I'm guessing 3 years in, most of your life is still owned by the banks, etc. Um, uh, so how do you project? Is this a 10-year project, or 5 years, or a 20-year project? How do you view it when you're doing it?
Yeah. So I think I'm really at the point now where my head is coming above water, just kind of, okay, I got the core structure and the basics kind of, a little bit on autopilot. Um, and now taking a deep dive into different avenues of progress, what's working, what's not working. Um, Definitely getting a lot more comfortable within that self-pay space as it pertains to patients, because an uninsured patient doesn't mean that it's a poor patient. It just means they don't have standard insurance. So there are a lot of entrepreneurs like myself and other business owners that have very small business who don't have traditional insurance. So they may have a catastrophic plan and they just pay everything out of pocket and put it on their taxes or whatever. So um, I think right now, I don't necessarily have that full length of time plan, but I will say I'm at the point where I do need an additional either physician or provider in the office. And so that's what I'm working on. That so first quarter in the new year, hoping to get someone else to help deliver care.
So, just to expand on that question,
Mhm.
and if I was to come back and find you in 15 years from now, do you think you'd have um, 3 doctors or 13 doctors? In other words, do you see yourself becoming multi-site practice, dominating Atlanta and beyond, or are you just going to be here and maybe one other location or whatever? What do you think? What's the ambition?
Yeah. So I think that is still to be determined, but I think I want Colorectal Wellness Center to be, or Cola Wellness, or some derivation of, to be a household name. I want to make a greater impact on colorectal care across the country, and whether that is in direct patient care or other educational products and offerings, that's what I want. Definitely seeing a major growth within the area of women's colorectal health, and not only just pelvic floor in the sense of, you know, what we can surgically offer, but just the core understanding of pelvic floor disease for women and the changes that happen in either bearing or rearing children, physically, and as it pertains to colorectal health. So while I would love to see a colorectal wellness center in every state, the changes in healthcare, the pendulum is still swinging right now. And so I have to just be very mindful that the next 24 to 48 months may see a completely different landscape than is what exists today. But I think the easiest thing that I can do is my part in continuing to put forth education in any way possible for colorectal health.
It was clearly foolish of me to think that you would restrict yourself to Atlanta, you know. The rest of the nation is is just sitting there waiting to be managed by Erin King-Mullins. Get out of my way. Okay, so uh, and this, of course, is inherently a stupid question because small business owners realize that they don't work banking hours, etc. But when you switch the lights off on a Friday evening, at least
Mhm.
in theory, what's next for Erin? What do you do outside of this business and entrepreneurial hamster wheel?
Wrestle with a 2 and 5 year old, be a wife and bonus mother to three older daughters, and be a friend, while some of the things that I like to do, was while some of the things I was able to do more freely previously, as far as for traveling, is limited right now, I've found satisfaction in other ways, and it looks like the tide is changing as well for allowing me to do that. But I think also sometimes just resting. Um, I have established a culture with my staff and my patients that while they truly know that I see them as a human being, they see me as that too. And so I actually had to get rid of my answering service because I wasn't getting paged. So I basically have a glorified paging service, right? Old school pager. It comes to the app on the phone. Someone leaves a message or a number, you call them back, because it just didn't need the answering service. And so really people don't bother me much, which is, I think a plus on both sides. They've been given great information and education on if this, then that, and they know how to utilize me or find me in the event of emergency. So,
Yeah, I mean, for 20 plus years, I've given my patients my cell phone number, and uh, I know a lot of people do that nowadays, but they certainly didn't 20 years ago. And
mhm.
truth of the matter is, they don't abuse it.
Yeah.
And you're much better off knowing than being surprised by the fact that they're in some emergency room 30 miles away that nobody told you, etc. I mean, I think the it's quite remarkable, in the modern world of technology and everything that, one of the things that challenges patients in every form of business model is how the hell to call the office
Hmm.
and get somebody to answer who isn't either rude or an idiot,
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, it's how hard can that be? I mean, the answer is very.
Yeah.
It appears to be very hard, So, um, let's just pivot away from the serious-minded stuff,
Mhm.
and ask you a few other questions. So, what talent that you do not have would you really love to have if you had a magic wand?
So this is still the nerd in me, but man, if I could have my husband's Excel spreadsheet skills, I could I could do so much more. And I would have to rely on other people a little bit less because in the middle of the night when I'm thinking of XYZ or I happen to be awake, I can just like plot out whatever thing. So that is still really nerdy. But we were talking about this, getting my daughter back into piano lessons. I actually would still love to learn how to play the piano.
Yeah, well, there's quite an extreme between the Excel spreadsheet and the piano. And if you were playing the piano, what would you be playing
So smooth jazz is my actually, I think my favorite smooth jazz artist is Boney James. So something that would go along with that, which is tough. The piano is not necessarily featured as much in smooth jazz, so I'd have to figure out how to merge the two. So stay tuned.
And would you like to play like Oscar Peterson or Count Basie?
Oscar Peterson.
No, it didn't take any time to think about that.
Yeah, I gotta protect my fingers. I'm still a surgeon.
All right. So you know that cabin that you want to have in the mountains. So you're up there for the weekend, and you have two guests that you can invite for the weekend, not just for an hour or two, but they have to spend the weekend, and you can invite any two guests from history, dead or alive. Who would they be?
Let's see, dead or alive. So alive, I would say right now, just because he has caused a lot of introspection on my behalf and interest in some of historical things that I may not have realized have happened. Believe it or not, Dave Chapelle. Um, he has a very interesting take on life and comedy, that I would love to better explore and understand.
He
Um,
does. He does indeed, although you would have to supply a lot of ashtrays, I
I
think.
know I'd have to wear my N95, but if he,
He
uh,
seems to he seems to me to be I know this is very simplistic, but he's almost a North American version of Ricky Gervais.
hmm
He gets away with stuff that other people don't, but they both get away with it because there's an inherent truth and deep thinking in it, you know.
yeah, yeah,
So
yes.
who would he be paired up with?
Um, so, man, it's been a long time since I've had to answer that type of question. And it's funny, like over the years, your thought processes and values and goals change,
Yeah.
and you have to figure out like who. Um, and as I'm embarking upon a time in my life where my thoughts on spirituality and religion are changing compared to how I was raised, and it sounds so, cliche, but I would actually probably say Jesus Christ. Um, because we're growing up, you're taught, and as far as for me, Southern Baptist family, you're taught that the Bible is it, like it is the word, and then you
Yeah.
realize, well, there were a lot of parables and maybe it really shouldn't have been perceived literally. um so I think a lot of my internal struggles could be definitely solved with that conversation.
And how do you, so two questions about that. So first of all,
And then I don't know if they could be in the room together though.
well, that was going to be my one of my questions. My first question was going to be, I think everybody understands that Jesus, uh, in reality, didn't look like the pictures that you see of him. You know, as some sort of red-headed white guy wearing Middle Eastern garb. But how do you think he would get on with Dave Chappelle?
Um, I it's the heart of man, that over time I've definitely learned. And we all have our vices. We all have our, depending on how we were raised, depending on what values were instilled in us, but what tragedies and blessings we've experienced over time obviously shapes who we are. And so I think he would, in a judgment-free, manner, probably counsel both of us.
I'm just sitting here thinking of this slightly surreal concept that we're sitting on a surgical podcast talking about Jesus and Dave Chapelle.
He would eat. I think Jesus would offer himself up to both of us, to his kingdom. You know, we're given the free will, to, I guess, to make that decision.
What single virtue do you think a surgeon must have?
Honesty.
What form of honesty?
What do you mean by that? I guess.
Well, honesty comes in different forms, doesn't it? And it could be, honesty in the way you deal with the patients, honesty in the way you deal with their money, honesty in the way you deal with your own self, introspection of your abilities and your characteristics, etc. Or do you want to, are you just
Yeah.
applying that to all of that?
Yeah, I'd apply it to all of that, especially in this day and age. And I'm not saying it just because of this day and age, like you're always on, right?
Yeah.
So, with the digital age, everything is permanent. Everything is this, patients record you unknowingly or knowingly, and all of those types of things. And so there's a lot. So if honesty is the basis of your actions and motivations, then people tend to in general give you more grace if an error is made, um and I'm not saying an error as far as for surgical complications. I mean, a true, genuine, error is made. They understand that your heart was honest in doing whatever you were doing. And so there should be no malice behind, whatever it is. So,
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. It gets back to what we were discussing earlier about the post-COVID systems relationships. My sense is that freedom to forgive or willingness to forgive somebody who you know is basically honest and has been is much less readily available now. One misstep, which may be honestly made, is greeted by instant termination or whatever, and it's not a it's a dangerous world out there, etc. So I think you may have answered this question by your weekend guests, but I'll give you another option, which is to a person alive today who you greatly admire.
mm, so no fame, no, anything crazy, but my husband, I've obviously gotten to know him over the years and learned some of the different challenges that we share, both similarly but also separately. And to see him, that he could listen, he could do a whole nother podcast for you, being in the healthcare, finance, investment banking space, and then eventually becoming an entrepreneur himself as well after being employed by some of the big banks and big institutions. So I think but we lean on each other. That's how we got here. And so I'd be remiss in trying to just say that I'm sucking up to some celebrity. So
No,
yeah.
you're just sucking up to his Excel skills, you know.
No.
All right. Um, your proudest moment in life.
Ooh. Um, I would probably say and I can't for the life of me at this moment remember exactly who it was, but the first time a fellow physician willingly came to me as their doctor. I think that is kind of like the ultimate validation that, that word got out that you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not an imposter,
Yeah.
etc. Okay. Um, Three things that you would like to have in the future.
Is it three things?
Mhm.
A house on the beach, a house in the mountains, a house. No, I'm just kidding. Three things. More time with my kids. If it doesn't have to be something material. More time with my kids, and I would say yes, some sort of destination home. I think not only teaching your children the appropriate, life skills, but also rewarding them with experiences. What are we if we're not raising our children in a world that was better than whatever we were raised in and grew up in? So yeah, more time with my kids, a house somewhere, destination for them. Um,
And we know that you want to
uh,
learn how to do Excel spreadsheets.
uh, I don't know.
Oh, it's
Maybe
okay. We
yeah,
can
we
live
go with
with
two.
just two. So the last 20 years or so has seen a lot of changes in medicine and surgery. We've seen minimally invasive surgery being probably the biggest thing in surgery, and molecular medicine coming into every aspect of medical care. What's your prediction for the next big thing in over the next 20 years?
Um, I just see continued growth, like it or not, in that space of the full body scan, right? That super early detect anything that could potentially go wrong type scan. Um, but we're gonna have to figure out how to use that, responsibly. How does that play into insurability, whether that be medical insurance, life insurance, all of those types of things. But I mean, it's happening. So, hilariously, my husband sent me a text this weekend. I think it was maybe in Japan, something about a specialized toilet that will help tell you about your body composition and things like that
Yeah.
based upon your poo.
Mm.
And so yeah, so
He's
we're gonna be getting it from both ends.
he's going to sign up as the U.S. distributor. Okay, so 5 minutes on much more important stuff. Favorite food.
Ooh, Thai food.
Okay, favorite movie.
Ooh, it gets me every time. Fried green tomatoes.
Home or away.
Home.
Scariest animal.
Scariest animal? Oof, snakes. I can't even see them on screens, computers. Can't.
Window or aisle.
Window.
Cats or dogs.
Neither.
Beer or wine.
Wine.
Beatles or Stones.
Uh, Beatles.
PC or Mac.
PC.
One song for the rest of your life.
Mm, One song for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm way too indecisive for that because my mood, they'll tell you the OR staff, one day it's smooth jazz, one day it's 90s R&B, one day it's Bob Marley. So I would probably not last very long with one song.
You'd have to have a compilation album.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, Erin, I want to thank you so much for spending the morning with us today. I really appreciate it. Um, we'll send this out sometime in the new year, and at that point, your already rapidly rising fame will become uncontrollable, of course.
Yeah. So how are
Thanks.
you doing otherwise?
I'm doing fine. Let me
Okay. Oh,
uh,
sorry.
pause. No, no, you're good. I'm just going to pause the recording. uh, or stop the recording.